Okay, our next speaker, coming in from upstate New York, senior engineer at Teladoc, is Brandon Richey, who will be telling us about his journey to bringing Elixir into production. So, ladies and gentlemen, Brandon Richey.
All right. Everybody hear me okay? All right. So, my name is Brandon Richey. Some of you may be familiar with kind of my nonstop posting on Medium about Elixir. It's something that I kind of fell in love with. And I'm director of engineering at Teladoc. And I'm going to talk to all of you about our journey with Elixir into production at scale. So, who is Teladoc? Just kind of a quick introduction to who we are and what we do. We are the first and largest provider of telehealth medical visits in the United States. We have over 12.6 million members, and we've done over 3,000 consultations in a single day. So if you think about a doctor's office, imagine you're a doctor seeing 3,000 people in one day. That's a number that we have achieved. We have offices located in Purchase, New York, so if anyone's familiar with kind of the slightly upstate, right around the Connecticut area. We also have an office in New York City and in Louisville, Texas, which is where we kind of got our start. And we run Elixir in production. This is a point that I am very happy about, and more importantly, I'm very proud of, that we have Elixir in production. Yes. So we have to kind of talk about what actually led us in that direction to pick Elixir, to start investing time and resources, because there is always a risk involved adopting some sort of new technology. So what got us interested? It started off with one of our coworkers saying, here's this language that, not a lot of people have heard of, but it has this amazing, amazing potential for performance. And the syntax is nice, and it's just a joy to work with. And there are all these clever abstractions that you don't really have to think about, and you just get them for free. Things like GenServer, Bruce was talking about the macro that you could have it build out everything. And then you look at the Elixir macro for that, and it's one line, use GenServer. There you go, you have it. It was a syntax very similar to Ruby. We are a Ruby shop, so it was very easy for us to pick up. And it had smart design, smart feel to it. Again, it was enjoyable. It was a lot like Ruby's experience of having a joy in programming. Now, at the time, we were also kind of investigating Rust and Go as kind of potential alternatives, ways for us to kind of bolster the performance of our platform, but nothing really stuck. Nothing really felt comfortable. At Teladoc, we don't try to design for our current scale. We try to design for 10 times or 100 times our scale, because if we only try to design a platform for what we're doing right now, we're always playing catch up. So what kept us interested? Honestly, Phoenix. We finally had this nice web framework that was comfortable, that made sense to us, and we had Elixir behind it, and we had OTP behind it, we had Beam behind it, we had all of these nice things building up. So we had our great and familiar web framework to build out parts of our application stack, and it was fast by default, insanely fast by default even. That is a point that's actually very difficult to underscore, because you'll always hear people talk about like, oh yeah, I wrote this app and it's pretty fast. It doesn't even compare to that first time you get an Elixir app running in production and you're looking at those response times and like, wait, hold on, what's that symbol? That's not MS. No, that's how do I do that on the keyboard? You end up having to Google it and like, oh, okay, well, yeah, it's microseconds, but you never think about designing a platform in microsecond response times. Think about like, milliseconds, that's a good number to reach for. Now I'm sad when I see something not getting that little microsecond symbol. Even better, it took care of the harder parts of designing resilient and massively concurrent systems, and we could just focus on writing code, on building our platform, building our features. We didn't have to think about how we were going to design out every single little piece. So our reactions to our first little prototype where we were checking things out, wow. Just wow. Like, how else do you describe a reaction to something where you're seeing these numbers and you're seeing everything come together and you didn't write a lot of code, you didn't do a lot of work, you just came together. So that was good. That was a great first start, but we had another question that we had to answer about this amazing new technology. How do we get this into production? I love this, but I want to use it. I want to be able to say that I am an Elixir developer, that is my job. And we got lucky. We actually had a project that would require something about that. But we still had a couple of different problems, and we had one thing that we had to solve. How do we introduce it? Because you can't just throw something into production and call it a day. You actually have to kind of ease into it, and you have to ease not only yourselves and developers, but you also have to kind of ease management into it, and you have to kind of build up that rapport to get people to adopt it. So let's talk about introducing Elixir into the workplace. So at this point, my enthusiasm, I was set. I was all ready to use Elixir. But I'm not the only person who can drive that decision. It has to be a team effort, and it has to be a team decision. And I was kind of annoying people. I was like, look at this. Look how fast this is. We're not getting this anywhere else. But again, you can only evangelize that and show that off and brag about it for so much. And maybe I got a little annoying. I think some people may or may not agree with that. I wanted to do more with the language, but I couldn't change the entire tech stack in a single day. So how did we do it? You can't just tell tales of how great it is. You have to do two things, and this is very important. You have to demonstrate what it is that you want to do and what it is that you want to work with, and you have to educate people. Because without the two combined, it's very difficult to drive any sense of adoption. So I started off with a small demonstration, and I kind of knew that education would kind of follow along with that for free, just kind of a free side effect. And I know there may be some people who hear me use the word side effect and maybe bristle up a little bit. This is a good kind of side effect. So we were a Rails shop, and many of the developers had lots of experience with Rails dating back to beta days. So I started off with the 15-minute scaffold blog demo. It was a very good way for me to showcase to other developers the syntax of Elixir and some of the language's features. Even better, it dispelled some immediate fears and reactions from people who had never heard of the technology. Statements like, it's going to be too hard to get started in. I'm so familiar and comfortable with Ruby. Why would I want to switch to something else? So we did this demo, and kind of very quickly, we had a list of everyone's favorite features. So what did people like the most? The pipe operator. That alone, I mean, being able to describe your function or what it is that your function is doing through a series of actions, that pipeline operator just makes it so nice and so easy to understand. Pattern matching. Being able to know exactly what it is that your function is going to do, how things are going to get set up, it's a wonderful, wonderful feeling to just understand your code. Guard clauses, again, knowing how a function is going to be used, and even being able to guarantee how your function is going to be used is just amazing. And, of course, seeing response times measured in microseconds. That will frequently be a favorite feature and one of the first things people notice. So immutability was the one thing that I was originally concerned about because we had a big team of Ruby developers and telling them that, well, once this is here, that's it. You can't change it anymore. I expected that to be kind of a big stumbling block. I've heard about immutability being difficult to adopt in the past, but it turns out we've all been supporting various legacy Rails code bases, and most of us have just grown tired of trying to figure out these insanely difficult edge cases. The promise of having less wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey state mutability bugs to track down was a huge winner. But demonstrations alone aren't enough. People were interested, but now we have to actually get people educated on it so that they feel comfortable with it. And we still have to persuade management, because now we have the dev team kind of going, but we need everyone from the top and the bottom to be really into Elixir. So honestly, I felt that in this case, it strongly outweighed the risks. Yeah, it's new, it's a young technology, but the potential there is just so strong that we really have to make that push for it. And one of the things that we were concerned about is skill, because we had a team of very talented Ruby developers, but we didn't have any Elixir developers. And what if we had to hire for Elixir developers? How are we even going to do that? There were, maybe a couple job postings here and there, but when we stopped and we weren't worrying about, okay, are we going to hire Elixir developers? We realized we were approaching the problem in the wrong way. What if instead of trying to hire Elixir developers, we focus on hiring good developers, and we train them and educate them on Elixir? Education fosters adoption every time. Elixir and Phoenix are great products, but you still have to train people on them. So we had a few lunch and learn topics on Elixir to kind of get people going, get people comfortable and familiar with the language. And as a bonus, creating these lunch and learn topics and recording them, writing posts, creating training materials, we didn't have to worry about hiring Elixir developers anymore. Instead, we could focus on hiring good developers that had an interest in Elixir. And honestly, you get some really, really great applicants when you have something like Elixir as one of the technologies that your company is using. Because the people who are interested in Elixir are the people who've run into all kinds of issues architecting large applications in the past. So we also wanted to kind of demonstrate or mix our demonstration with education to really pull everything together. So we actually held a longer session, and this was a session where we all sat down and we built a chat service start to finish in Phoenix. And we did it with no extra technologies. We didn't use React. We didn't use Node.js. We didn't use anything else. We just used the core of what Phoenix provided. And honestly, it was great. It was a fantastic introduction. And it was the kind of thing, if you had told me a couple years ago, I want you to try to build a chat service in Rails in an hour and a half, I probably would have laughed you out of my office. Now, yeah, absolutely. You want a chat service? I'll build it in Phoenix for you. I'll have it done in an hour. So we succeeded in 2 areas. First of all, we demonstrated that it's easy to build something in Phoenix. You're not going to lose a ton of productivity. And we demonstrated that we could, as a team, all build something in Elixir and Phoenix without everyone feeling like they were changing gears or losing their favorite language. We had one hidden benefit that I didn't realize until a little bit after this. For some developers, this was actually their introduction to an entirely different method of building a web application. We were not dealing with the standard request-response model. Now, we were dealing with real-time applications, which is a completely different mindset, and it's a complete shift from what you're typically used to building, just a website. So jump ahead a little bit. We had our first project. It was right after ElixirConf, and I knew at that point I had to build something. And we were approached about improving an internal monitoring solution. So the requirements for the project were clear. We had to capture information from some of our largest applications. It all had to funnel in to essentially one application. It had to be insanely resilient. It had to be error-free. This is a monitoring thing, so you can't really introduce problems into your stack with something like that. It had to introduce no new needless complexity into our stack either. We wanted to keep things simple and easy to understand. And we had a short deadline for this. And honestly, it went great. To this day, we've really had no problems that were specific to the Elixir Phoenix code base. We've had plenty of issues with other things. We've had issues with, the database behind it or this or that, but we've never had an issue where it was like, oh, it's this line of code right here. Just hasn't happened. Or this framework is causing this issue. So we integrated this Elixir application. We had to figure out how to deploy it, though. And given the goals of our application design, we needed to kind of understand some of the gotchas. And some of this we kind of found out as we went along. So initial challenges, EXRM and conform. So this is one issue some of you may have run into. All of our development machines, our MacBook Pros, we would be deploying this to a CentOS box, which doesn't really work. If you try to build it via EXRM, you push the tar file up and start it, not going to work. So, okay, fine. We didn't want to have Elixir necessarily running on any of our production boxes. So we took a first pass. We created a VM, which became our build VM, and got it set up, used that to deploy. It is admittedly a little bit of a manual process, and it's not the best way to handle it yet, but that's something that we are improving as we go along. Also, one thing that might be kind of important to note, the default EXRM release will create a maximum of 5 rotating log files at 100K each. I didn't realize that until the first day that I logged in. It was like, why is this, where are my logs from an hour ago? What's going on here? And sure enough, there's a configuration setting that you need for that. Some of the other problems, we use New Relic for monitoring. New Relic doesn't really support Elixir in any way, shape, or form. So we couldn't get APM, but we had server-side monitoring. Also, we needed to implement error notifications, and a lot of libraries for things like AirBreak and AirBit are still pretty young. And we also had one other problem. And I'll kind of wrap it up on this point, that our Phoenix application could take in more connections without breaking a sweat, to the point where we actually thought something was wrong with the app. We thought it was dropping connections or something because, let's see here. You can't see this very well on the screen. I apologize. But basically, of all of the cores that box has, none of them are even remotely pegged. We have nothing. And this is coming from about 20 applications feeding into one application, doing database inserts. And every core is sitting at, maybe sometimes one of them would peak up to 2% usage. And we're like, oh, look, it's doing something. It just worked. And it was performant out of the box. And our average RAM usage, if anyone in here, plenty of people in here are familiar with Rails apps, this thing sits at 500, 600 megs, just straight, just the whole way through. No spikes, no peaks, nothing, just steady. And that's a wonderful thing to see. To the point where our infrastructure team, we actually went to them and said, you know what, I think we made our VM for this kind of too big. I think we could scale that back. That's a wonderful conversation to have with your infrastructure team. Like, I think you guys gave us too strong of a box. Can we scale it down a little bit and maybe have a couple smaller ones? It's a conversation that everyone loves to have. And that was during peak times as well. So honestly, Elixir Phoenix has been a great initial experiment for Teladoc. It has been absolutely wonderful for us. we have more projects coming down the pipe. We have a team that absolutely wants to work in more Elixir. We have a management team that recognizes the potential of an easier to maintain and a more performant application. Teladoc is only going to keep growing from here. And as we keep growing, I think kind of the answer is clear. We're just going to need more Elixir.
Thanks, Brandon. I think we have time for 2 questions. Questions for Brandon?
Yeah?
Quick, half question. 500, 600 megabytes sounds a little bit too high, actually. Did you look into binary copying?
So the question was that 500 to 600 megs of usage for the RAM for our Phoenix application is actually kind of high. It is. That's actually the usage of the entire box. So that's all of the extra services that are also running on that same box. The fingerprint of our Phoenix server is about maybe 1 to 200 megs. So theoretically, we could scale that down even more. Yeah?
Are you doing continuous deployment, or for your deployments, how are you pushing out new versions?
So right now, the question was, how, are we doing any sort of continuous deployment, or how are we pushing out new deployments? Right now, it's still a relatively manual process. There is a script that lives on side of that build VM that we're using that pushes everything up and runs the upgrade command via the release. But we are hoping to maybe get it integrated with something like Jenkins to do a little bit better of a delivery than what we have right now. Yeah?
How have you found the development speed compared to the work you were doing in Ruby and Rails, given that some libraries don't exist yet?
So the question was, how did I find the development speed in comparison to what I've seen in Ruby? And honestly, I was really concerned about that, especially with the third-party library problem. Third-party library, that's an issue that you have to solve. Sometimes it'll bite you, but I've actually found that I had become too reliant on third-party libraries for everything. I probably don't have to mention LeftPad too much in here. Elixir and Phoenix kind of taught me, do I really need that? Because maybe I don't. And everything else for the development speed was fine. I feel more productive in Elixir than I do in Ruby now. I've been doing Elixir for maybe not even a full year, and I've been doing Ruby for maybe 10 years. And the fact that I'm already more comfortable in Elixir code, if I do have to write a third-party library or something that would be there, that's fine. I actually welcome the opportunity.
We'll do one more.
All right.
Just a quick question. Could you describe your building deployments a little bit better, since you said you're deploying to CentOS, so you're actually building RPMs deploy out through?
No. So the question is, how are we actually doing that deploy if we are building packages or anything like that? We just use EXRM and conform. So that creates a tar file, essentially, that you just SCP up to the server, and you run the hot upgrade command on it and call it a day. It's nice to not have to think about, do I have to build a package for this, or do I have to do this or that? It simplifies that entire deployment question.
Brandon Richey.
All right, thank you.